She was 52 years old, 5'4", and they laughed when she walked onto that mat. Two men half her age thought they were about to make an example out of her. Instead, she made history in front of 282 of the most elite warriors this country has ever produced. This is the story they tried to keep quiet. This is the story of Diana Reyes. If you love your mom or your dad, if you believe that real strength has nothing to do with size or age, hit that subscribe button right now and show some love. This one is for every person who was ever underestimated, overlooked, and written off. Let's go. Part 1. The woman nobody saw coming. There is a particular kind of invisibility that comes with being a woman of a certain age inside a world built for young men. It is not always loud or cruel. Sometimes it is quiet. A meeting where your idea gets ignored until a younger man repeats it and everyone nods. A hallway where eyes pass over you like you are furniture. A career where your record speaks volumes but your presence registers as background noise. Diana Reyes had lived inside that invisibility for so long that she had stopped fighting it with words. She had found another way. Diana Maria Reyes was born in San Antonio, Texas, in 1971, the second of 4 children raised by a father who worked 2 jobs and a mother who cleaned houses 6 days a week and sang in the church choir on Sundays. They were not a wealthy family, but they were a proud one. Her father, Ernesto, had served in the army during Vietnam and came home changed in ways he never fully explained. Her mother, Lucia, had the kind of quiet iron in her spine that doesn't announce itself but never bends. Diana grew up watching both of them and absorbing something she could not name at the time. She would come to call it later, in a rare interview, the art of continuing. Not thriving, not winning, just continuing no matter what. She was athletic from the time she could walk. In school, she was faster than most of the boys in her grade, which delighted her and embarrassed some of them. She played soccer, ran track, and by the time she was 16 had developed a natural instinct for reading physical space that coaches noticed immediately. She was not the loudest athlete. She was the one who saw things before they happened. She anticipated. She calculated. While others reacted, Diana was already 3 steps into the solution. When she was 17, a Navy recruiter came to her high school. Most of her friends laughed him off. Diana stayed after and asked him 37 questions. She remembered the exact number because she wrote them all down the night before. He answered all 37. She enlisted at 18, and from the moment she stepped onto the base for the first time, something inside her that had always been searching found its place. She was not welcomed with open arms. This was the early 1990s, and the culture inside the military was not what it is today. She endured things she has never fully discussed publicly. Slights, dismissals, and moments that would have broken someone made of lesser material. But Diana Reyes was not made of lesser material. She trained harder than anyone around her. She studied tactics while others slept. She earned her rank with a methodical, patient ferocity that her commanding officers struggled to describe in official reports because none of the standard language quite captured it. She specialized in hand-to-hand combat training and close-quarters tactical instruction. Over 2 decades, she trained hundreds of servicemen and women. She developed curricula that are still used today in modified forms. She earned a reputation not just for her technical skill but for her ability to read a student, to understand exactly where their weakness lived and to address it with precision. She was not a loud instructor. She did not perform. She taught, and her students remembered what she taught them for the rest of their lives. By 2023, Diana held the rank of Lieutenant Commander. She had been passed over for promotion twice in ways that people inside the system understood without needing to say out loud. She had buried 2 teammates. She had survived 1 deployment that she does not discuss. She had been married once, briefly, to a man who could not handle the life, and she had raised her daughter Maya largely on her own, with help from her mother Lucia when assignments made solo parenting impossible. Maya was 22 by the time this story reaches its climax. She had watched her mother's entire career from the sidelines and had never once seen her quit anything. What Maya did not know, and what very few people knew, was that Diana had received a diagnosis 7 months before the day that would change everything. Stage 2 breast cancer. She had processed the news alone in her car in a hospital parking lot in San Diego, sitting with her hands folded in her lap for 40 minutes before she drove home. Made dinner, helped Maya with a work question over the phone, and went to bed. She told no one inside the military. She began treatment quietly, scheduling appointments around duty assignments, managing the side effects with the same disciplined precision she applied to everything else in her life. She was not in denial. She was not being reckless. She had simply made a decision that the cancer would be dealt with on her terms, in her time, and it would not be allowed to define her final chapter in uniform. That decision, as much as anything that happened on the mat that day, is what makes this story what it is. Part 2, Coronado. The Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California, sits on a strip of land between San Diego Bay and the Pacific Ocean that feels, on certain clear mornings, like the edge of the world. It is a place where the standards are not theoretical. They are lived, every single day, by people who have chosen a life that most cannot imagine. The culture there is particular. It respects one thing above everything else: performance. Not rank alone, not politics, not reputation. What you can actually do when everything is on the line. In the spring of 2023, the center was running an expanded combative training program designed to integrate lessons learned from recent operational theaters. The program brought together instructors from across multiple commands, and it included a demonstration component where senior instructors would perform live technique demonstrations in front of assembled SEAL candidates and active operators. The idea was partly educational and partly cultural, a reminder that mastery does not have an expiration date stamped on it. Diana was invited to participate as a senior instructor and demonstrator. She was one of 3 women included in the program, and the only one over the age of 40. When her name appeared on the schedule, there were conversations. Some supportive, some less so. A program coordinator who has since requested anonymity told a journalist that the reaction to Diana's inclusion ranged from genuine curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. A few people used words that would not be appropriate to repeat here. The general attitude among a vocal minority was that a 52-year-old woman with a cancer diagnosis, had they known about it, would have been a non-starter. Since they did not know about it, the skepticism focused on her age and gender alone, which was more than enough fuel to feed the doubt. Diana arrived at Coronado on a Tuesday. She spent 2 days in preparation meetings, reviewing the program structure, meeting with other instructors, and walking through the facility. People who interacted with her during those 2 days describe a woman who was quiet, professional, and unremarkable in all the ways that unremarkable becomes a kind of armor. She smiled. She shook hands. She attended every meeting. Nobody who saw her during those 2 days had any specific reason to believe they were about to witness something they would talk about for the rest of their lives. On Thursday morning, the demonstration was scheduled for 9 o'clock in the main training facility, a large open space with high ceilings, industrial lighting, and a series of competition-grade mats laid across the central floor. The bleachers on 3 sides would hold the assembled audience. The final count was 282 personnel, a mix of active SEAL operators, SEAL candidates in various stages of training, and a handful of civilian and military observers from partnered organizations. Diana ate breakfast alone that morning, oatmeal and black coffee. She called Maya before she left her quarters. Maya asked how she was feeling and Diana said fine, the way she always said fine, in a tone that closed the door gently but firmly on further inquiry. After she hung up, she sat for a moment in the quiet and did something she has described in exactly one subsequent interview. She thought about her mother, Lucia, scrubbing floors with cracked hands and singing on Sunday mornings, and she understood in a way that she had perhaps always known but never articulated that the singing and the scrubbing were not separate things. They were the same act. Endurance wearing 2 different faces. She put on her uniform, checked her reflection once, and walked to the facility. Part 3. The setup. The morning program ran through 3 other demonstrations before Diana's segment was scheduled. The crowd was attentive but loose, the particular kind of focused relaxation that highly trained people develop over years of operating in high-intensity environments. There was laughter. There was commentary between operators who had known each other for years. The atmosphere was professional but human. When the program coordinator announced Diana's segment and she walked onto the mat, the room did not go silent. That is an important detail. It did not go silent because her entrance did not command the room the way a 6'2" operator in his physical prime commands a room. She walked out and the room continued its low murmur, and a few heads turned, and a few people nudged each other, and the reaction was, in the language of that culture, underwhelming. Several people in the front rows have since admitted they expected a brief, polished, safe demonstration. A few techniques, well executed, appropriate for someone of her age and rank. A respectful round of applause. The next segment. What happened next came from a direction nobody anticipated. Two instructors stepped forward to serve as Diana's demonstration partners. Their names have not been released publicly at their own request, and this account will respect that by calling them Instructor 1 and Instructor 2. Both were in their late 20s. Both were combat veterans with impressive service records and significant training in combative disciplines. Instructor 1 stood 6'1" and weighed approximately 210 pounds. Instructor 2 was 6 feet even, approximately 205 pounds. Both were physically imposing in the specific way that years of elite military training produces. Dense, fast, and conditioned to perform under pressure. What happened before the demonstration officially began has been described differently by different witnesses. The most consistent account is this. There was a moment, captured in peripheral vision by multiple observers, where Instructor 1 leaned toward Instructor 2 and said something. Both men then looked at Diana and one of them smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a man who has already decided the outcome of something before it begins. A woman who was standing near the mat and whose account has been corroborated by 3 others said that she felt her stomach tighten when she saw that smile. She did not know why at the time. She said it felt like watching someone walk toward a fire they couldn't see. Diana saw the smile. She has confirmed this. Her response to seeing it, as she described later, was not anger. It was clarity. Something inside her that had been held at careful distance for months. The cancer, the treatments, the exhaustion she managed each morning like a debt she paid before anyone else woke up, moved into alignment with something older and deeper. She described it as becoming very still inside a body that was about to move very fast. The demonstration began. Part 4. The Fall. The program called for a controlled sparring demonstration, a structured exchange of techniques designed to showcase defensive and offensive combative principles for the assembled audience. The parameters were clear. This was not a competition. It was instruction made physical. For approximately 90 seconds, the exchange proceeded within those parameters. Diana demonstrated several defensive techniques with clean execution, and the crowd began to pay closer attention. There was a shift in the room's energy, subtle but real, the kind that happens when people begin to recalibrate an initial assessment. Then Instructor 1 departed from the parameters. The first kick was not a controlled demonstration technique. It was delivered with significantly more force than the exercise called for, aimed at Diana's left side, connected with her ribcage. The sound was audible in the front rows. Diana absorbed it and her posture shifted. Those who were watching closely saw something cross her face that was not quite pain and not quite surprise. It was recognition. She knew exactly what was happening. She did not scramble. She did not rush. She rose with a deliberateness that the crowd would later struggle to describe because it did not match any category they had available. It was not the slow rising of someone who is hurt, though she was hurt. Her ribs would later be confirmed to have sustained a hairline fracture. It was not the explosive rising of someone operating on adrenaline alone. It was something between those things. Controlled. Intentional. The rising of someone who has already decided everything that comes next and is simply allowing her body to arrive at the position the decision requires. She looked at Instructor 1. She looked at Instructor 2. Neither of her expressions was angry. Multiple witnesses have used the same word independently to describe her expression in that moment. Calm. A calm that was not passive. A calm that was the surface of something enormous moving beneath it. Instructor 1 moved first. He came at her with a combination that was, by multiple expert accounts, executed with genuine force and intent. What happened to that combination is the part of this story that has been replayed, analyzed, and discussed in combative training circles ever since. Diana was not where the combination expected her to be. She had moved, partially, in a way that required the kind of spatial anticipation that cannot be fully taught, only developed over decades of obsessive attention to how bodies move in relation to each other. The partial redirect of the combination placed Instructor 1's weight distribution in a position that, for approximately 4/10 of a second, made him structurally vulnerable in a very specific way. Diana used those 4/10 of a second with a precision that several experts who reviewed subsequent accounts described as extraordinary even by elite standards. The technique she applied to Instructor 1's right leg was a joint manipulation combined with a downward force application that, executed at the speed and angle she chose, produced a fracture of the tibia. Instructor 1 went down. The sound was not subtle. Several people in the crowd flinched. Instructor 1 did not get up. Instructor 2 had approximately 3 seconds between the moment Diana engaged Instructor 1 and the moment she turned to face him. In those 3 seconds, by multiple accounts, Instructor 2 did not retreat. He advanced. Whether this was courage, miscalculation, or the particular stubbornness of a young man who has not yet been shown the full range of what the world contains is not for this account to determine. What is clear is that he advanced, and Diana was ready for him in a way that he was not ready for her. The technique she used on Instructor 2's left leg was different from the first, adapted in real time to his approach angle and speed, which speaks to a level of in-motion calculation that combative instructors who were present have since described in terms usually reserved for practitioners at the absolute peak of their discipline. Instructor 2 went down 7 seconds after Instructor 1. His fracture was of the fibula. He did not get up either. From the moment Diana rose from the mat to the moment the second instructor hit the floor, 11 seconds had elapsed. Part 6. The room. What happened in that room in the seconds and minutes after Instructor 2 fell is described with remarkable consistency by people who were present, despite the fact that those people occupy a wide range of positions in the military hierarchy and have no particular reason to coordinate their accounts. The room erupted. Not immediately. There was a gap of approximately 4 seconds after Instructor 2 fell during which nobody moved and nobody made a sound. Those 4 seconds, by universal account, felt much longer. One SEAL candidate described them as the longest 4 seconds of his life, and he had been through BUD/S. And then, starting somewhere in the back rows, the sound began. By the time it reached full volume, it was not applause in any conventional sense. It was something larger. Every person who was physically able stood. Those in the front rows who rose first were visible doing something that hardened military operators are not typically observed doing in professional settings. They were emotional. Not all of them, but enough of them that the ones who weren't found themselves surrounded by those who were. A Master Chief Petty Officer with 23 years of service who was seated in the second row said later that he stood without deciding to stand, which had never happened to him before in any setting. He said his body stood before he knew he was standing, and when he became aware of it, he did not sit back down. Diana stood in the center of the mat while the room found its voice. Medical personnel moved toward the 2 downed instructors, who would receive appropriate care and would recover, though the road back from the injuries they sustained would take months. Diana did not look at them with triumph. She did not raise her hands. She did not perform for the crowd that was performing for her. She stood the way she had risen, with that particular quality of stillness that was not absence but presence. After a long moment, during which the sound in that room continued to build rather than diminish, Diana Reyes looked out at 282 people who were on their feet for her, and she said something. Those close enough to hear it have reported it with minor variations in exact wording but complete consistency in substance. She said, "Pain is not the end. It's the beginning." And then she walked off the mat the same way she had walked on it. Quietly, without performance, without looking back. The sound in that room followed her all the way to the door and did not stop for a long time after she had gone through it. Part 7. What they didn't know. The story could have ended there and it would already be extraordinary. But the story did not end there, because what happened after the demonstration revealed layers that transformed it from a remarkable physical performance into something that reaches well beyond the walls of that facility. The first layer to emerge was the cancer. Diana had managed her diagnosis and treatment in such complete operational secrecy that when the information became known, first to her commanding officer and then, gradually, to the broader military community through channels that move faster than official communications, the reaction was a second wave of impact on top of the first. People who had been in that room and were already processing what they had witnessed received this additional piece of information and found that it changed the entire geometry of what they had seen. One senior officer described it as learning, after watching someone climb a mountain barefoot in winter, that they had also done it with a broken compass and a bag full of rocks on their back. The achievement had been extraordinary. The additional context made it something for which he did not have an appropriate word. The cancer revelation also produced reactions that were not straightforward. Some people felt guilty for having harbored the dismissive attitudes that had preceded the demonstration. Some people found that the combination of Diana's physical performance and her medical situation activated a kind of fierce protectiveness that surprised them with its intensity. Several operators sought out people they trusted to process what they were feeling, which was itself, in that culture, a remarkable thing. The second layer was Maya. Maya Reyes had known nothing about the demonstration. Her mother had not mentioned it, which was consistent with their relationship. Diana shared operational details of her work selectively and always after the fact. Maya learned about what had happened the same way most people outside the military community would eventually learn about it, through a chain of messages and phone calls that moved with the speed of something that has found its audience. Maya's reaction has been described by those who were with her when she heard about it in a way that is difficult to reduce to summary. She apparently sat very still for a moment, which those who know her say is characteristic of a response she inherited from her mother. And then she cried, which those same people say is something Diana Reyes herself almost never does, which perhaps explains why Maya does it more readily. She cried for a long time. When she was done, she called her mother. Diana answered on the second ring. Maya asked her why she hadn't told anyone. Diana said, in the account Maya has given publicly, because telling people gives them the chance to talk you out of things. And I've worked too hard to let anyone talk me out of anything. Maya told her that she loved her. Diana said she knew. And then Diana asked if Maya had eaten dinner, and Maya laughed. And that particular phone call, which has been described by Maya in two separate public contexts, may be the most human moment in this entire story. The third layer was institutional. What happened in that room at Coronado did not stay in that room at Coronado, because nothing of that magnitude stays anywhere anymore. The story moved through military networks, then into veteran communities, then into broader public circulation, and with each expansion it picked up weight and dimension. The two instructors who had double-kicked Diana to the floor were subject to an internal review. The details of that review are not public. What is public is that both men subsequently issued formal apologies to Diana, and that the program coordinator who designed the demonstration protocol accepted accountability for insufficient pre-demonstration parameter enforcement. Whether any of those responses were adequate is a question that different people answer differently depending on what they bring to it. Diana's response to the institutional aftermath was characteristic. She engaged with the required processes professionally and without apparent bitterness. She did not seek public attention and gave only one formal interview during the period when the story was at its highest visibility. In that interview she said that she was not interested in the story being about what two people did wrong. She said she wanted it to be about what 24 years of commitment to something larger than yourself produces in a person. She said she hoped it would be useful to someone who needed to hear it. Part 8. The Deeper Current. This account has so far stayed close to the events of that Thursday morning in Coronado and their immediate aftermath. But to understand what Diana Reyes did that day, it is necessary to go one level deeper, to the current that ran beneath everything, to the question of what it actually takes to get up off a mat in front of 282 people when your ribs are fractured, you are 7 months into cancer treatment and someone just laughed at you. The answer, if there is a single answer, seems to live at the intersection of three things. The first is preparation. Diana did not wake up the morning of that demonstration with abilities she had not possessed the morning before. Everything she did on that mat was the product of 24 years of daily work, of 10,000 hours repeated until the techniques were no longer techniques but reflexes, not thought but breath. The 11 seconds did not happen in 11 seconds. They happened across 2.5 decades. The mat was only where they arrived. The second is identity. Diana Reyes had built a self that was not dependent on external validation in the way that most human beings' sense of self is dependent on it. This did not make her cold or disconnected. The evidence of her relationship with Maya and with the students she trained over decades makes clear that she was deeply relational and deeply invested in the people around her. But her center of gravity was internal in a way that made it very difficult for external forces to destabilize her. When she hit that mat, the crowd's reaction, the laughter, did not reach the part of her that decides things. Could not reach it. She had built that part of herself too deep for ridicule to find. The third is something harder to name. Diana herself came closest to naming it in her single public interview when she talked about her mother, Lucia, scrubbing floors and singing. She said that her mother had taught her something that she only fully understood on the mat that day, that endurance is not the absence of suffering. It is the decision to make suffering pay for something. Every hard thing her mother had ever done had paid for something. Every hard thing Diana had ever done had paid for something. The cancer, the loneliness, the years of being passed over and looked through and laughed at quietly in the corners of rooms that were not built for her. All of it was currency, and on that mat, in those 11 seconds, she spent it. There is a particular American myth about individual triumph that tends to flatten the people it celebrates. It turns them into icons rather than humans, and in doing so it makes their achievements feel like products of exceptional individual nature rather than the accumulated weight of all the ordinary days that preceded the exceptional moment. This account has tried to resist that flattening because Diana Reyes deserves better than a myth. She deserves the truth, which is more complex and more useful than any myth. The truth is that she was a woman who hurt, chronically and deeply, in more ways than one. The truth is that she was afraid sometimes, that she doubted sometimes, that she was tired in ways that go beyond physical exhaustion. The truth is that she made 100 quiet decisions, over years and months and days that nobody saw that built the person who got up off that mat. The truth is that the 11 seconds were made of all the seconds that came before them, the seconds that looked like nothing because they were a woman alone in her car in a hospital parking lot, processing a diagnosis with her hands folded in her lap. The seconds that looked like nothing because they were a mother helping her daughter with a work question over the phone after a day of managed pain. The seconds that looked like nothing because they were a soldier doing her job in rooms that did not see her. All of those seconds were building something. They were building toward 11. Part 9. Aftermath and Legacy. Diana completed her cancer treatment in the fall of 2023. Her prognosis, as of the most recent public information available, is favorable. She has continued to serve in a modified capacity while her body completes the recovery process. And she has begun work on a training curriculum that draws on her full experience, including the elements of mental and physical resilience that the events at Coronado brought into public focus. She has been invited to speak at multiple institutions and has accepted a small number of those invitations, always on her own terms and always with the same consistent message. Not a message about being exceptional. A message about being deliberate. About deciding every single day what your suffering is going to be for. About the difference between endurance that is merely waiting for pain to stop and endurance that is converting pain into something permanent and useful. Maya Reyes has spoken publicly on a few occasions about her mother's story. In one of those appearances, she said something that has been quoted frequently because it captures something true. She said that people want to make her mother into a superhero because superheroes are easier than the truth. The truth, Maya said, is that her mother is a woman who chose, every single day, in the smallest and least visible ways, to continue. And that choosing to continue, when continued long enough, becomes something that looks from the outside like invincibility. But from the inside, she said, it always felt like just another day of deciding not to stop. The 282 people who were in that room at Coronado on that Thursday morning have dispersed back into their lives and their careers. Some of them are in places this story cannot reach. Some of them will read this account and recognize themselves in it. What is consistent in the testimony of those who have spoken about what they witnessed is that the experience did not leave them where it found them. Something in them was rearranged by what they saw. Several have described subsequent moments in their own lives, moments of difficulty or doubt or pain, where they found themselves thinking about a 52-year-old woman with fractured ribs and cancer in her body getting up off a mat because she had already decided, at some level below decision, that she was not done yet. That is the legacy of 11 seconds. Not the technique. Not the fractures. Not the standing ovation from 282 of the most formidable people this country trains. The legacy is what those people carried out of that room and into the rooms that came after, and what it has caused them to do differently, or to refuse to stop doing in moments when stopping would have been easier. The legacy is the permission Diana Reyes gave to every person in that room to take their own pain seriously as a resource rather than an obstacle. The permission to understand that the thing you are surviving is not separate from the thing you are capable of. That they are the same thing wearing two different faces. Just like the scrubbing and the singing. Just like Lucia's daughter in her uniform on a mat in Coronado, getting up. Part 10. The final word. There is one more detail from that Thursday morning that has not yet been mentioned in this account because it belongs here at the end, where its weight can be properly received. After Diana walked off the mat and the room continued its extended, rising response, after the medical personnel had attended to the two instructors and the facility had begun the process of absorbing what had just happened within its walls, someone found Diana in a corridor outside the training area. She was standing alone, her back against the wall, her eyes closed. The person who found her has not been identified publicly. What they have described, through an intermediary who shared the account with a journalist, is that Diana was not celebrating. She was not processing triumph. She was doing something that this observer found more powerful than anything that had happened on the mat. She was crying. Quietly, with her eyes closed and her back against the wall. She was crying. Not from pain. Not from the ribs. Not from the cancer or the exhaustion or any of the physical tolls that the morning had extracted from a body that had been quietly paying enormous costs for months. She was crying, the observer said, the way a person cries when they have finally been seen. When something they have carried in silence for longer than they can clearly remember has finally been witnessed by enough eyes in one moment to make the carrying of it feel, for the first time, worth exactly what it cost. She stood there for a few minutes, and then she opened her eyes, and she pushed off the wall, and she walked down the corridor toward whatever came next. That is the whole story. And it is not a story about a woman who broke two men's legs, though she did that, and though the doing of it was extraordinary. It is a story about a woman who spent 24 years building something invisible and indestructible inside herself, in the dark, without an audience, out of materials that most people would have classified as wounds. And it is a story about what happens when something built like that finally gets the room it deserves. It is a story about your mother, if your mother ever kept going when stopping would have been easier. It is a story about your father, if your father ever absorbed something quietly and paid a debt in silence and got up the next morning and continued. It is a story about every person you have ever loved who carried more than you knew and kept carrying it without asking to be seen. If you love someone like that, if you are someone like that, then this story is yours. And if you want more stories like this one, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button. This channel is for people who refuse to stop. And we are just getting started. Now we want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now and tell us where in the country you are watching from. Your city, your state, your region. We want to see how far this story has traveled, because a story like Diana's deserves to reach every corner of this country and then some. Where are you watching from? Let us know below.